I'm convinced that as a man, being good looking is more valuable than a college degree. And as a man that is not attractive, it's just brutal sometimes when you're working with good looking guys just to see how much easier everything is for them. Some guys really are living life on tutorial mode. I have some firsthand experience with that, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But it hurts to hear it. But a man's looks is a better predictor of his financial success than pretty much anything else. And I'm not just making this up. In a study from 2015, researchers found that there is a durable, persistent, and economically large correlation between the facial attractiveness of men, as measured by their high school yearbook photos, and their earnings in their mid 30s and their early 50s. There's also been similar studies done on height that have all reached a similar conclusion that height is correlated with higher income. So instead of telling the youth to focus on their studies and work hard to make good grades so they can get a college degree, so they can get that good job, maybe we should be teaching young men how to improve their looks. It sounds crazy, but maybe 4 years of looks maxing would actually be a better use of time than 4 years of college. I actually have doubts about that for a very specific reason. But first, I want to share an anecdote from my personal life that's one of the reasons I think looks are more important than anything else when it comes to a man's financial success. There's a guy I went to college with that basically he's dumb as a rock, but he's good looking. Good guy, as far as I could tell. I don't have anything against him, and I didn't know him very well. I just know him because we were in the same lab group in physics class. But that was enough to give me a solid impression of his intellect. He just never seemed to be able to grasp basic concepts. He was always asking me to help him with homework assignments, and I could tell he would actually give it an attempt before he asked for help, because you could see in his notebook where he had been working at it. But it was actually shocking to me just how stupid this guy was. Most of the time, he was doomed from the start because he couldn't even understand what the problem was asking for. Which, sure, this was physics class. It's not exactly easy. Some of the problems were pretty difficult, but the way he would misunderstand things was just baffling to me. And he also seemed to have trouble reading and writing. I remember one day he kept pronouncing inertia as inertia. I also remember he didn't know what momentum was. He acted like he's never heard that word before. Momentum. If I recall correctly, he did end up passing the class. So he didn't fail. He squeaked by with a C. But I know he did end up changing his major eventually. I'm pretty sure he graduated with some kind of business degree when originally he was in mechanical engineering. But I remember near the end of the semester, this guy was telling the rest of us in class how he ended up having two offers from companies he met at the career fair. And it was two companies that I also applied to, but I never heard anything back. They just ghosted me. So this guy ended up getting hired for a co-op at one of these companies, which is basically the same thing as an internship. The only difference is with a co-op, you work part-time during the semester and you take less classes, where an internship is generally done during the summer. I think that's really the whole difference. But yeah, this guy got hired for a co-op and he got another offer too. And this was during either his first or second year. Which, if you don't know, it's pretty rare to get internships that early in engineering. Most people aren't getting an internship until junior or senior year. And one of the other guys in our group asked to see his resume, so I ended up looking at it too. And from what I could see, there was nothing special on there. Like, there was nothing special about his resume. He had a lower GPA than I did, and he was on a sports team. And those were the only differences between his resume and mine. Now, I can't say for sure whether this guy had some connections at either of the companies that made him offers, But I don't think he did since he found out about the jobs at the career fair. So, why did he get selected for interviews and then get offers when I applied to these same exact jobs and I just got ghosted? I was also at the career fair, by the way, so I met the same people from these companies that he met. You know, we should have had equal consideration for interviews and all that. The only difference, as far as I can tell, is that I'm not good looking and he is. It had to be looks. I think it had to be looks. They chose him because he was good looking. You could argue maybe it was charisma or whatever, you know, maybe there was something he said that got them interested. Maybe it was his confidence. And I'm sure that might have played a role. But why do you think that guy would be confident and charismatic while I'm the opposite? Also, you got to keep in mind with the halo effect, even if a good looking guy is just stuttering, stumbling over his words, he's going to be perceived as confident anyways. So, yeah, this good looking guy got 2 job offers in a field that he had to eventually change his major because it was too hard for him. And I'm pretty sure his looks were the bright spot on his resume that got him those offers. But the thing that really stood out to me that just made it so obvious how this guy was coasting on his good looks, our lab instructor for that class was very strict. Probably the strictest grading lab instructor I ever had. If you don't know, usually the lab section of most classes is essentially a free pass. You have to write lab reports, but they're usually just not graded very strictly. So you can still pass even if you totally fucked up on all your calculations. But the lab instructor for this physics class, she was the exception. She was very strict on the grading. If your calculations were off, or if she didn't like the way you worded things in your write-up, she'd be putting red marks all over your shit. I still made good grades on most of my reports because I was a good student, but I would get random points marked off here and there for all sorts of things. Well, one day when we got our reports back from the previous week, me and the 2 other guys in my group, aside from the good-looking guy, we all got marked off for what we wrote in the conclusion because we worked on it together in the lab, so all our conclusions were pretty similar, and apparently we got something wrong. So we're talking about this, and then the good-looking guy revealed that he didn't get any points marked off. And apparently he wrote basically the exact same thing as one of the other guys. I think he actually just copied the other guy's conclusion and changed like 1 or 2 words. But the meaning was the same. And we were talking about it in our group, and all of us agreed that the lab instructor was really strict on the grading, except the good-looking guy. He said he pretty much never got points marked off. Now, I didn't read all of his lab reports, obviously, but I did see some of this guy's writing, and it was pretty bad from what I saw. There's no way he should have been making better grades on his lab reports than the rest of us. And in that one case where we actually compared his conclusion section to the rest of our reports, his was basically the same. But not only did he not get any points marked off, she even drew a smiley face on his paper, and she wrote, "Great job," with an exclamation point. It wasn't a big impact on any of our grades, by the way, but it just seemed obvious that he was getting preferential treatment. Because also, this guy would call the instructor over and ask her questions sometimes, and every time she would act so flustered, like she was just super nervous around him, but she would be smiling a lot. I think this lady was from Egypt or something, if I recall correctly. She was probably in her mid to late 20s, but she didn't act like that with anyone else. It was just when this one guy talked to her that she would start acting like a shy teenage girl. Fellas, getting a job is exactly the same as getting a girlfriend. Your education and your qualifications don't matter near as much as your looks. Obviously, for certain jobs, you have to have a certain degree, but your looks are going to help you more than anything else, outside of actually having connections at the job you're applying for. With this guy I knew from physics lab, I think I already mentioned he had to change his major because he couldn't cut it in engineering. But I'm still friends with him on Facebook because we used Facebook for our group communications. But that's how I know, even after he changed his major, he still got to keep working at the same company that hired him as an engineering intern. They just gave him a different job after he changed his major. And now he's like a director of something at some other big corporation. And I can't stress enough, the guy is just not smart. He was very incompetent in physics lab, which really isn't that difficult. I also know he did really bad on all the exams in the class because we would always talk about our grades in our group in lab. I don't think he ever made higher than a C, and some of the exams were pretty easy. Only one of them was actually difficult. But that's what it's like for attractive people. Men and women, although I think most women benefit from preferential treatment, even if they aren't attractive. But it's a fact that for men, there is nothing that will increase your chances of getting a job more than being good looking. It'll help you make better grades too. And it's not just with women that attractive guys get special treatment. The halo effect works with everyone. Other men will also give you better treatment. I think it might be an evolution thing, like men naturally want to stay in Chad's good graces because there's a small chance of catching some runoff, I guess. So basically, just by being around Chad, maybe it'll increase your own chances of reproducing, or maybe it's just as simple as symmetrical face make monkey happy. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's obvious that more attractive men tend to make more money on average, and really just in every aspect of life, more attractive people are more successful. It was really eye-opening for me back when I had my first corporate office job. For most of the time I worked there, most of my coworkers there were older, and almost everybody they hired there in any position, all the way from the lowly warehouse trolls up to upper management, everybody that got hired there got in through some kind of connection. Either they were an old colleague of one of the hiring managers, or they were somebody's cousin, or they were related to someone that worked for one of our customers. I think I was one of the only people there that didn't have any connections. I lucked into the job because I had just emailed them asking about jobs at the exact moment they were desperate to hire someone, so that's how I got in. But I remember when they hired this new account manager that was a guy that, like me, he did not have any connections in the industry. I know he didn't have any connections because my boss mentioned it, because my direct supervisor, he was a good guy. He wasn't a fan of all the nepotism. So when this new guy got hired, his attitude was like, it's about time they gave someone new a chance. And I remember thinking at the time, that's good. You know, I was happy to see they were seemingly just hiring someone that legitimately seemed to be the best fit for the job. And I still do think that's a good thing. But after a few weeks working with this guy, I started to realize maybe he did get his job through a kind of nepotism. So first thing I noticed, as soon as this guy started working there, I'm talking about on his very first day, all the women in the office were talking about him, talking about how handsome he is and everything. And I guess before he started working there, his last job was actually being a professional hockey player in Europe. I don't know much about hockey. I'm pretty sure he wasn't the highest level of pro. And I don't know why he played in Europe. He was from the US. But obviously, that's something that everyone was impressed with. I had one older female coworker. She wasn't old. She was probably in her 40s. But she was actually pretty good looking. She had huge knockers. And I remember seeing this guy talk to her one time, and it was like she turned into a nervous little schoolgirl. She was stumbling over her words. She was laughing nervously when usually she didn't act like that at all. She usually acted like a confident older woman. But that's how women act in Chad's presence. And I think he might have actually boinked the Big Knockers lady eventually because we were all at a convention one time. A lot of people from our company were at this convention, and basically everyone from my work was staying on 2 floors of the hotel. And I remember me and Chad were on the same floor, and the Big Knockers lady was on the other floor above us. But I remember after dinner, well, during dinner, everybody was drinking, and Chad and Big Knockers were flirting a lot. And then I remember going back to the hotel, and I was there for, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I don't really remember. But I went to go down to the lobby to ask for more towels. And when I was getting on the elevator, the Big Knockers lady was getting off the elevator on my floor. And she looked kind of shocked when she saw me, as if she was hoping nobody would see her. And she had changed her outfit entirely. That's what really stood out to me that made the whole thing it just something seemed odd about it. Because at dinner, she was wearing like pants and a sweater, basically. But when I saw her getting off the elevator on my floor, which is not the floor where her room was, she had changed her clothes completely. Now she was wearing this sexy dress, like she's going clubbing or something. And I just remember looking at her and she made a weird face. Like she kind of looked like, oh shit. She looked like she had been caught. Then she got off on my floor where Chad was also staying. Now, I don't know for sure why she got dressed up after dinner late at night just to go to another floor in the hotel we're all staying at. But it seems likely to me that she was headed to somebody's room. And it seems likely to me that she was headed to Chad's room because they were sitting next to each other at dinner and they were flirting and everything. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But yeah, I remember when we had our yearly strategy meeting, only a couple months after this guy started. I was always too shy to speak up at these meetings. This company took the yearly strategy meetings very seriously. But this guy, who was still basically brand new at the job, he was damn near running the meeting. Any little suggestion or comment he threw out, everybody was just like, oh, yeah, what a great idea. We do need to look into that. It's hard to describe how it was if you weren't there, but it was like anything he said, like any little joke he made was hilarious. Any suggestion he made was the most insightful thing anyone had ever heard. And maybe he did have some decent suggestions. I don't really know because he was on the business side of things. So I was an engineer. It just wasn't my domain. But after the meeting, I heard the CEO talking to Chad's supervisor, and he was like, boy, that kid's sharp. Where'd you find him? Then there was another time that these people from some industry magazine visited our office. They were just profiling our company, I guess. But it was 2 people, an older man and a young woman, and they were going around to every office, every cubicle, talking to everybody. I guess they were looking for people to interview for the article, or maybe they were just trying to get a better idea of what our company did. But they ended up running into Chad right outside my office, and then they were just standing there talking for a while. This was right after they left my office, actually. I shared an office with my supervisor, so they pretty much talked to my supervisor, and they ignored that I was even there, of course. But then they ran into Chad after they left my office, and they started talking to him, asking him about what he does, how long he's been with the company, and everything like that. And then the president of the company walked over there, and they were all talking, and they started taking pictures. And I remember the older guy that was with the magazine, he was telling the president about Chad. He was saying, I think Chad here might be a good candidate for our young professionals under 40 list this year. And the president, I think he thought the guy was joking because Chad was still new there. There's no way he even knew what he was doing yet by that point. So the president said something like, haha, well, Give him a few years to get his feet wet and he really might surprise you. And then the magazine guy was like, no, really, you should nominate Chad for our Young Professionals Under 40 list this year. And I think the president was getting jealous, maybe. I don't know, but you could tell he was against the idea. Because like I said, Chad was still brand new at that point. Not just at our company, but he was new to the whole industry. So it didn't make sense for him to get recognized like that. But yeah, then a month or two later, we get the magazine where they profiled our company, and right on the front page of the article, it was a picture of Chad wearing a hard hat and pointing, which I'm pretty sure they just staged the photo in the warehouse. This guy had no reason to ever be wearing a hard hat. I mean, maybe he would need to wear one if he was visiting certain customers in the field, but nobody wore hard hats at our office. So I'm pretty sure they just staged this action shot with Chad looking like he's out in the field telling people what to do, when really his job would never look like that. They just used him as a model, basically. And that was the main photo they used to represent the whole company. Then in the article, it had like a long paragraph quote from Chad, just saying something generic. And there was only a tiny little itsy bitsy quote from the company president. And I think another higher up guy also had a quote in the article. But yeah, they basically wrote the whole article putting Chad front and center when he was literally the newest employee with virtually zero experience. So I don't know, maybe he was good at his job, but he was getting so much praise when he was still brand new. And it wasn't due to anything he actually did. He just had a massive halo effect anywhere he went. And I've had other experiences that lead me to the same conclusion. It's not just these two guys I talked about so far, but I'm pretty sure being good looking has a better chance of making you successful than getting a college degree. Even if it's a so-called in-demand degree, a guy that's good looking, but he just barely skates by and gets the degree with the lowest grades possible, that guy's going to end up more successful than any average looking guys that graduated with highest honors. That's just how the world works. Looks are everything, especially for men. I hate how society still has this attitude like, looks don't matter for men, but women are always under pressure to look their best. It's like, over here in actual reality, women can be below average looking and still have a freaking solar system of beta simps orbiting them. But a below average looking man these days will usually end up chronically alone. Or at best, he'll end up dating a woman that's way below his looks match. And his professional career will suffer just as much. It's the same in the professional world. Looks matter more for men than they do for women. Now, I actually don't think that looks maxing is always the best use of your time. I think young men should do some basic looks maxing, as in try to lose weight if you're fat, get a good haircut, or try to hold on to your hair if you're going bald, try to dress decently, because those things are all relatively easy to do, so you might as well do those things. But beyond that, any kind of hard maxing, jaw surgery, rhinoplasty, and everything like that, the thing you got to understand, there are very, very few men who are going to be elevated to Chad status from any form of looks maxing. Do you think it would be worth thousands of dollars to go through cosmetic surgery only to come out on the other end going from a 4 out of 10 to a 4.3 out of 10? Because that's the reality. That's how it usually goes. Nobody's getting cosmetic surgery and going from a 4 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10. It's just not happening. Maybe in some rare cases, but statistically, that's probably not you. So it still might be worth it to get a college degree if you're just dedicated to going into a certain field where a degree is required. And you probably should looks max a little bit, even if just for your own health, you should try to not be fat. But going all the way with the looks maxing to where you're getting all these surgeries and you're injecting weird chemicals into your body that you bought off the dark web, that's almost definitely not worth it. Chad is born Chad. You would be very hard-pressed to find an example of a guy that's gone from being sub 5 to being a Chad because of looks maxing. It just doesn't happen. If you found this video entertaining, please consider watching some of my other videos. There's also some secret videos you can watch for free on Patreon, so check that out. No sign-up required, you can just watch the videos. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.